Cool.
Hello and welcome to Seismic Cinema. Drop the popcorn, put your feet down and grab a book because we are joined by our very special guest, our second ever interview, and it is Hayley Macfarlane from Macfarlane Lantern Publishing and also an esteemed writer. So, joined with us as well as our co-host Colin, as per usual. And yeah, really looking forward to this one. We've been talking about it for a few weeks and basically we're not doing a movie review this week. We're going to go for a wee cheeky interview with our good pal from school. And there goes my dog.
That's the dog.
That's the dog trying to escape the room. So basically, totally fluffed it now because I'm. So Hayley, do you want to just kind of explain how we know each other from school?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Hayley. I moved to Dunoon just as I started in Dunoon Grammar School. So I was just about 12. So I knew nobody at all. So I didn't have any friends like going into school. Paul was in my house. There's 4 houses in Dunoon Grammar School for people who don't know. Apparently, the one that I was in, Argyle, doesn't exist anymore. Thanks
cancelled.
to Colin for letting me know about that.
I know, it's such a shock.
Gutted.
It's because they used to always win the competitions. They needed to even it out a bit.
So they just done as existence.
Yeah.
That's not fair. But yeah, I think I might have spoken all about like 6 words in a row to Paul through the whole 6 years of school. Although I do remember back in the old school building when Mrs. Duncan taught us for PE, she would always pick Paul as our country dancing partner. And I always thought that was really funny.
That was the worst days of my life.
Was he good?
No. I have 2 left feet. I got no
It was
rhythm.
hilarious.
She was a bit handsy too.
Oh, no.
I'm kidding.
Colin, I don't even remember ever like personally speaking to you in school, but I do remember once we hit the age of 18 seeing you in the pub sometimes. But then I moved up to Glasgow and then my mum moved away from Dunoon when I was like 20 and I've not been back since.
Really?
Yeah.
You've done well escaping.
Oh, well.
I mean, it's not really worth coming back to Dunoon when you're like, oh, well, I'm not coming to see my mum. I don't have anywhere to stay. And people are like, when are you coming? We need a night out. And I'm like, never.
that does make sense, I suppose, if you've not got anyone to actually come back for.
Yeah, I mean, Dunoon's a lovely place. I would love to go back, but it's actually really quite expensive to like stay overnight. And it's a bit of a faff to like get to from Glasgow, even if you have a car, which I do not, as a 30-year-old who doesn't drive. So it's just kind of one of those things that it's like on my wish list. I will go back to Dunoon one day, but it hasn't happened yet.
To be fair though, you've done well escaping, and going by your bio on your company page, you've gone through some journey from the lab coats onto writing books and doing your own publishing.
It's a bit of a weird journey. So like, I mean, when I was in school, I loved writing and art just as much as I liked science, but it's that typical thing. It's like, go to uni to do something sensible. So I went to do genetics at uni, and I loved it. Like it's not like one of these things that I didn't enjoy doing and only did for the sake of a career. I loved it and I did want to work in it. Then I did my PhD and academic research. It is soul destroying. It almost never works. And even if you like have a great supervisor and like a really supportive group of friends and everything, it's quite hard to like have to do something every day knowing that it probably won't work. And even if it does work, you then have to like prove why you didn't mess it up. You're like, oh, you got a positive result. Nah, it was probably false positive, wasn't it? Can you do like 4 weeks of experiments to prove that it was true? And then, so it's kind of like that for 3.5 years. And then if you manage to get to the end of it, then yeah, you get your doctorate. So I am Dr. Macfarlane, which is really cool, but I have used it basically only to like put on orders for Domino's Pizza or like when I bought a couch. I was like, actually, it's Dr. Macfarlane. Actually, I got a wedding invite the other day from a friend, and it said Miss Macfarlane. I was like, who's Miss Macfarlane? Because I've been a doctor for 5 years now.
Where's my title?
You get too many titles now with your author name as well.
Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, long story short, I left academic research. I did like 6 months in the medtech industry, didn't like it. I hated my boss and stuff. And whilst I was looking for like other jobs in science, I kind of fell into doing writing freelance, like just through like random job postings online, like for freelance work. And I guess you could say I didn't like mean to fall into this career, but I just, with every month I did it, I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm a writer now. And then after about like a year and a half of that, I was like, nah, I want to commit to this like properly and write my own books as well as the other stuff I'm doing. I discovered I really liked making book covers, and I was really good at meeting clients and like finding my own people to work with on a freelance schedule, and discovered it was much more fun to be my own boss, even though that can be very stressful sometimes. And yeah, so I originally just set up McFarlane Lantern Publishing as a publishing name through which to publish my own books, because it's much easier, especially as a self-employed person, to have my own business name if I'm going to be doing all of this stuff. But I wanted to use my skills to help like publish other people's books, which is why at the end of last year I published a fairy tale anthology, fairy tale folk and horror stories, called Once Upon a Winter, which is the first of 4 planned seasonal anthologies with a group of 16 very, very talented writers from across the world. So the point was to try and get folk stories that like aren't just like the usual ones that people expect, as well as some that are completely original, they're not retellings. And that's been a great experience. Huge learning curve. It's completely different if you're like publishing your own work and you're like, oh, I messed something up. That's okay. It's my fault. I'll fix it. If you mess something up and you've got other people relying on you, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't look at that. But it's all good.
So on your shoulders.
So yeah, that's kind of like the 5-minute version of how I got to where I am now.
So what year did you start writing then? Like, what's the kind of timeline?
Well, I wrote my first book. Yeah, classic. I brought all of my books in because I needed to use them as props, and then realised that half of them I don't even have a physical copy of right now. But I do have Careless Assassin, which was the first one I ever wrote. And I wrote that during my PhD. As I mentioned earlier, PhDs are really, really stressful, and I needed something to like decompress when I was like out of that time. I was really active in musical theatre at uni, so I did have that. But I just needed another outlet, and I wasn't drawing that much, because I don't know, I didn't have the motivation, I didn't have it in me to like come up with drawings and designs, but I did have it in me to just like write stuff, which was, I was going to go for a swear word there, but we shan't swear in the podcast. It was rubbish. It was a load of rubbish, but it was like, the more you write, the better you get. It's the same with like anything. The more you run, the better you are at running. So I just kept writing, and then eventually I wrote a book, and it was that book, Careless Assassin. And I didn't know when I was writing it, though, that I was ultimately going to want to be a fiction writer. I did think I would maybe like to go into like science writing. But because I ended up falling into like ghostwriting for fiction companies and stuff, and while I was looking for other jobs, I got so used to writing fiction that I was like, I'm not going back to non-fiction. Yeah. Screw that.
It does sound a lot more interesting writing a bit fantasy novels than the opposite.
Well, it is interesting. I think I would maybe like to go back and write some non-fiction in the future, but more about like popular non-fiction. I think I'd like to write about the prevalence of genetics in movies and TV and books, and then from a professional perspective, talk about like what's actually possible and what wouldn't be possible. There are a couple of books that deal with this, like on about popular science, but nothing that's very specifically about genetics and genetic engineering, synthetic biology. That's my field of expertise. And there's so many films and TV and books that deal with this. I mean, Jurassic Park not being one of the most like prevalent I even used the Indominus Rex from the Jurassic World, like the 4th film, the ridiculous dinosaur that they made, as my mascot during my PhD and all of my presentations. He was the one that would have speech bubbles. I'd be like, any questions? My supervisor used to be like, can you please take that out? And I was like, no. So I would like to do that, but I've written quite a bit of genetic sci-fi, co-written with some people, which is really interesting because applying what I know from my professional academic background to fiction, in that I can make sure that it sounds plausible even if it's completely impossible, and I know that it's completely impossible. I think that's really interesting, and it's definitely like a cool way to like mesh both parts of my personality and my experiences. So that's quite satisfying.
That's always a big thing for me when I read books, is that you can tell when they've been written by somebody who knows, like if it's like a crime novel, you can tell if they know about forensics and all that kind of stuff.
That's why they're all lawyers and doctors.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dogs are just... They're either breaking out the room or they try to break in the room, and they can't make up their mind what they're doing.
That's why you get cats, Paul.
I do need cats. Oh!
I actually just put down a deposit for a kitten. I'm getting a kitten in July. I have 2 rabbits. I don't have dogs or cats.
I've got two cats here.
Oh, I've got 2 dogs, and they only seem to play up when there's interviews on. Like the last time was Neil's, and I kept disappearing every 2 seconds because they were either jumping about or scratching at the door or crying or barking or something. So it's only...
I do like... So I like that. We've got 2 cats, 2 dogs, and 2 rabbits. Perfect trifecta of pets.
Very even. Right, Paul, will I jump into maybe next wee bit?
You can do, sir. You can do, since I butchered that first section.
I think we like going off on tangents, but because this is quite a new thing for me, I've never interviewed an author before, so questions will just pop into my head now and again. But one of the pre-planned ones was, what are the biggest challenges and barriers you faced in your career so far?
Well, I mean, nobody wants the answer to be money, but it's money. If you want to be a writer, it's really tough. You either have to like fit it around a full-time job that you have, or if you're lucky enough that a part-time job is all the money that you need because you have a partner who's working, or you live with your parents, or like you're in circumstances where that's all the money you need, then that's great. But if you do need to get your income from somewhere, it's not going to come from your writing, not for a long time.
Yeah.
Publishing yourself is really challenging, but it can be very rewarding. I had to invest in different like Amazon advertising courses and stuff. Like it can cost a few £100s to go into these courses, but ever since I invested in that, I've turned a profit of a few £100 every single month on my books. But I have to run the ads, and I have to know what I'm doing. I have to be able to test things. The best month I ever had was February last year, and I got a few big book promo things, and I made £1,000 profit a month just from my books, which was great. Nice. Generally it's between like £200 and £400 profit a month from my books. So on top of that, I also work for a writing app called Atticus. So I just help other authors with how to use the app and like how to solve things, and like work with the programmers, which I really like. And then I do 2 or 3 projects a year where I am paid to write someone else's book as a ghostwriter. So my point being that the hardest challenge, and it still remains the hardest challenge, is being able to balance like actually being like an author to write my own stuff versus everything else that you have to do in order to maintain like a viable lifestyle. So the stats on income for full-time writers is really quite low, and it's skewed by people like J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, George R. R. Martin, like big whales that make a ton of money. Most writers, including like reasonably well-known published authors, traditionally published authors, tend to also be columnists for like big newspapers, or they write for websites, or they do like other kind of like content writing to supplement their income, because the book industry is probably one of the least profitable places to create something because there's so many other people in the chain, and it's a big profit industry for the companies. And that's why, if you know what you're doing, self-publishing can be great because you don't have to be beholden to all of that. But the other answer that's not as boring as money is creative burnout, because if you write too much and you're trying to do all these things to balance all the time, sometimes you just hit a wall. And when you do that, the impetus to be like, oh, I'll just push through it, I'll just keep trying. Nah, you need to take a step back.
Yeah.
You need to like accept that you need time out. You need to go play Stardew Valley. You need to go sleep for 14 years. You need to go get a pet. Or take a walk, like something. You just when I started out in 2019, I wrote a book every month for the whole year. But I actually wrote more than that because I was ghostwriting at the same time. So I think I wrote more like 20 books that year. Each book averaged about like 60,000 words. It sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but it was all I was doing. But the point was that then by the end of the year, there was nothing left of me. So in 2020, I think I only wrote like 2 books for myself and maybe 3 for a client, which is actually quite a lot. But for me, it was really disappointing because it was like less than a third of my input from the year before, and I thought I was supposed to be able to maintain that, but it wasn't. So especially when you're on your own boss with these things, you need to learn what your limitations are and work within it. And if that means that you need to supplement your income from other sources and you might not be able to write as quickly as you otherwise would like to, you have to, it can be difficult, but you have to accept that and like give yourself a sore face.
It's the same with anything. Like, your job is purely a creative thing.
Sorry.
Two can play this game.
No, I can't bring the bunnies upstairs. They're downstairs right now.
Stop acting like you don't want to be here.
Oh.
So because your job or career is obviously, it's all about creativity, you need to be rested and balanced, and you can't be creative when you're knackered. I think that's the...
you just can't. And you can get mentally exhausted, and then you'll have been like sitting in a chair all day, and then you go to bed and you're like, I'm not tired, because you're not physically tired, but your brain is scunnered. Like, there's nothing left there. And it can be that's something I still struggle with, like trying to like balance remembering that I should try and be a bit more physically active when my job is like so overwhelmingly like sat in front of a computer. The dictation is quite a good way of doing that. Not with this microphone. I'm not lugging this about with me, but I do have a little dictaphone. So when the weather's nice, I like to like go outside and walk for a bit and talk books through. And then just work with the transcription when I get back to my laptop. Sometimes it's like so unclean because there's been like 40,000 cars have gone past you. But other times you get a perfect time and it's really quiet and there's no wind. And you have something really clean to work with. So swings and roundabouts. Sometimes it benefits you and other times it doesn't. But you still get a walk at the end of the day. So
I think it's just really interesting that all the different things you do all link back to writing and your career, because it's interesting to see that someone who's wrote a lot of books, that still wouldn't be enough. Do you know what I mean? You do picture authors as that's their thing and that's all they do, but there must be a lot of people that do things like yourself.
Yeah, there's a lot more authors who do like a bigger ball of stuff like me than there are authors who only write the book that you know them for. We can't all be Brandon Sanderson, who runs a Kickstarter to fund all his new books and gets like £200 million to put into it, which was quite amazing. And to be fair, that was so successful for him that he then backed, for the next 24 hours, he backed every Kickstarter he found for someone who was looking to try and fund the publication of their own book or comic or zine or anything. And he like put a load of money into each of them. So like, good guy.
How much did you get in your Kickstarter?
I have never put up a Kickstarter, actually. I considered it sometimes, but then because I kind of like, I know what I'm doing, I do know how to like turn a profit, and I know how to like do the work to do these things. I feel like I'm kind of like, me asking for people to fund things through Kickstarters, taking the money away that they might have spent on like someone else who maybe needed the finances more. I don't know, maybe I should be more selfish and be like, nah, I want it.
Yeah, it's more
To
satisfying.
do more with my job, but
again.
I try to keep things as ethical as I can, because big game publishing is quite unethical, and I don't think I think a lot of indie authors and self-published authors don't want the environment to be as cruel and unwelcoming as it currently is, and the only way to change that is to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, and just be a better person in the field. So I try and do that.
Paul's dogs are making loads of noise again, so
Classic.
Actually, while he's away, I've actually thought of your return to Dunoon. We should get you in to do a wee talk. I think that'd be really good.
I would love to do that, actually.
The English department and the business department as well. That's where I work. I think both. There's real scope there for the two different things.
Well, I mean, I would love to do that. Last year, so for the audience, for context, I've got a book, The Boy from the Sea. That's why they're called Lear and Tom. Tom's a cat in it, and Lear's one of the primary main characters. Dunoon features heavily in it because the book is set across the west coast of Scotland.
Okay.
And last year, I contacted with one of the bookshops in Dunoon because I wanted to come and like see if I could arrange to do like a talk in Dunoon, and they never got back to me. So I was like, okay.
I'll speak to the English department this week if you want, if it's something you're interested in.
Yeah, I would love to do it. I mean, obviously, like it's coming up for summer, and I have 4 million weddings in June, but it definitely something for after summer. Yeah.
Like next school, they sometimes do like career days where like different people from different industries come in. So even something like that, if it was something.
Don't worry, I've been trying to get an invite to Careers Day for 5 years. I'm still not got it.
I would love to do that. Especially because I have the full university PhD experience, then going into going off my own, a completely different industry. It would definitely be cool to talk to the next generation and be like, by the way, there's so many more things that you can do.
And then start a campaign to get our Guile back.
Yeah, that's actually why I'm coming into the school, is because I'm going to actually start Incite a Riot.
That could be your opening line. Yeah. Anyway, I'll look into that and I can feed back to you if there's something coming up. Right, your first top 5 is coming up, and don't feel any pressures. We do a lot of rankings on the podcast, so if you can't think of enough people to meet a 5, that's totally fine. And
no, I did. I've got them all written down. But they're not. I'm not necessarily sure that the top 5 is in order. But it's a top 5 for each thing. But I don't necessarily think the one at number 1 is number 1.
Do you know what the categories are? I'll tell you.
Yes, Paul told me what the categories are.
Yeah, right. I thought you were just going in totally cold there.
Oh my god, I would totally blank if I did not know what the categories were. I would be so nervous. I'd be I cannot think of films anymore.
Just like Blindside.
The first one was villains and movie villains.
I thought movie villains was a really interesting one actually, because I asked Paul about it and he said he mostly went for horror, and I was like, oh my god, I totally forgot about the horror genre, which I love. I adore the horror genre, but there's obviously always a clear-cut villain in most horror films. So I tried to think outside the box, but then I was like, nah, I'm going to put some horror ones in there too. So my villains. So one of them is Char from Gundam, original Gundam, not Gundam Wing. It was an anime one. It was kind of a bit of a cheat, but I was like, you can't get me on, and I don't give one anime reference. So there are 2 anime references in my top 5.
You want
Vegeta.
You go wait for Vegeta. That's a good one. Char's a good one because he's obviously a villain in the first season, and in the second season he helps the protagonist for a bit. And you can see why he's doing what he's doing, but then he just ends up having to become the villain for the sake of the story. It's a big if for people who don't know Gundam, it's one of the most seminal sci-fi mecha anime that ever existed. And if you like The Expanse, Gundam is kind of set the groundwork for stuff like that. It's really interesting, big political sci-fi fantasy. But it started in the 70s, and the animation is a bit dated, but it's great, and it has banging theme songs. So that was one of them.
Yeah, I was saying earlier on, I was like, oh, Gundam Wing, and you're like, that's not
the worst one.
That's the one I remember.
Actually, I remember watching that at your house, Colin.
So I have watched that.
Yes, you have watched it.
Yeah.
I used to have all the toys, actually.
Maybe I remember. Yeah.
And I seen a big mask
so-
in the Linkin Park video, and I was like, "Oh, I'm cool."
Oh my god, the Linkin Park videos. Linkin Park was in so many anime music videos back in the day on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful. So yeah, Char was one of them.
Are you doing this
and I
5-1? Are they in order? Or are
It's
they
just-
just...
it's
they're
just
not. They're not
five.
really in an order. They're just like a conglomerate of top fives.
I'll
If you'd listened
Thank
2 minutes ago, Colin, you'd have heard it.
I did say it. My next one was Pinhead from Hellraiser because just top tier horror villain. You don't get much better than a guy with pins in his head torturing
I've still
everyone.
not seen Hellraiser.
Have you not?
Still not seen it, but I've played Dead by Daylight, and he's one of the killers in Dead by Daylight, and I've not even seen it yet. So that's one of the ones I really want to see.
You should. Don't watch Hellraiser 2 or 3 or any of the other ones. Just watch the first film. Like as usual with horror franchises. I mean, some horror franchises they go so over the top that it works for them, but with Hellraiser, just watch the first one.
Yeah.
Other villains, Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame because he terrified me as a child, and Hunchback and The Little Mermaid are my favorite like Disney films, and for different reasons. And he's just such a good villain, and the fact that it's like so much more of a grounded film, and it's a gothic film, and I love the gothic genre, always have. I was like, yes, what a good villain. And I watch it now, and I'm like, this film was way too adult for children.
That's years.
You should. It's definitely worth a rewatch, especially because with it being all remastered, all of the background illustrations like of Notre Dame and of Paris they're just so nice. My next one was Jareth from Labyrinth, which is my favorite film of all time. It couldn't be in my 90s films because it's from 1986. It was an 80s film. But I loved him with David Bowie writing all the music and everything for it. What's not to love about Dance Magic Dance? And my last one, because I was trying to be a bit like unexpected here, was Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, because he's the villain, but he's also the protagonist. And you don't actually know if he's done anything or not, or whether it's all like in his head. And I love that. I love that, like when it makes you think like, is he just extremely mentally ill, or is he going on like a full-on massacre? And I haven't read the book, and I know I should, but my partner Jake, he's like, the book is even worse. And I'm like, what a great recommendation of a book based on a film. Oh well, film's obviously based on the book, but the book is even more horrific than the film is. So
it's a great
always
film.
good to know.
I watched it for the first time like last year, and I just loved it. It almost made it into my top 10 movies that we did, but it was like a first reserve.
That's a good choice. But yeah, that's my 5. It's because they're all such different villains that I couldn't really like put them in like a chronological list. I was going to put in Joffrey Baratheon from Game of Thrones, but it's not a film. And I was like, I've already put in someone from an anime. So, although technically Gundam does have a couple of films that have Char in it, so it is eligible for the top 5.
Don't worry too much. When we were doing the 90s movies, I somehow had it in my head that Jaws was in the 90s, and it wasn't until we're actually filming it that I realised it wasn't the 90s. I think it's a lot of
I think it's 60s or 70s, yeah. It just
70s.
wasn't really grainy, Colin thought.
I think it was maybe just like the music or just kind of Spielberg in general. I don't know. I think I maybe just confused it with a different one.
Well, that was good. That was good that you touched on the kind of book into movies adaptations, because that brings us into our next kind of wee section of a couple of curveball questions. So the first
these are quick fire, by the way.
All right, okay.
You have 5 seconds, otherwise we terminate the interview.
All right.
So the first one is favorite book into movie adaptation.
Lord of the Rings.
Very nice, very nice. Which one?
Not The Hobbit. Not The Hobbit. Lord of the Rings. Which one of the Lord of the Rings? Probably The Fellowship, the first one.
I do like that one.
Even though they do skip Tom Bombadil and going to the Wood Elves, I think that was a smart decision to make. I am, of course, talking about the extended editions. I'm not talking about like the cinematic ones, because you can't watch Lord of the Rings if you're not watching the extended editions. They're like 4 hours long.
Are you more of a fan of the films or the books?
Well, this is actually a funny one. I read Lord of the Rings for the first time in Miss Doig's English class in second year. She used to have us, she used to have us read in our Friday class every week, and I used to love it because I was like, yes, I can just sit here and read. I was, of course, also reading Lord of the Rings at home, but I would just bring it in and continue reading it.
Yeah.
But I was one of these like absolute nerds that read the hundreds of pages of appendices at the end of the book. And I was like, why am I reading this encyclopedia of fictional stuff at age 13? But I did, because that's just what I did. I don't remember any of it.
You're at now. Look where you're at now, doing that.
I did the same with the Game of Thrones books because it has all like the family lines at the end, and it was quite interesting to try to work all that
Yeah,
out.
I mean, yeah, I've read all the Song of Ice and Fire, which was when I was doing that, and I was like, here's Nerd Hayley coming out again in her 20s. But I actually do think I like the Lord of the Rings films better than I do the books because it's the vision that it gives to it. Like actually getting that full physical setting of New Zealand against the absolutely gorgeous model sets and everything they built. That's why I don't like the Hobbit films, because so much of it's CGI and they extended it out way more than they needed to. And they also made it not about Bilbo at all, even though he's the main character. They were like, nah, he's not cool enough because he's an introvert and he just sits and watches things. And I'm like, that's why it shouldn't have been a film.
I've got the Hobbit book, and it's small. It's not much bigger than like Prisoner of Azkaban. If there's like a size comparison,
I like the Hobbit book more than I like the Lord of the Rings books, because I think the Hobbit's a really quite perfect children's tale, and I loved all the riddle scenes with Smaug and with Gollum. But yeah, I just took my own earring out. Well done. But the Lord of the Rings is definitely my favorite book to film adaptation.
Nice.
Certainly the first one that comes to mind, which usually means it's the best one.
Well, I didn't know if this was coming out later, but I just thought I'd ask what was in my head. Who is like the target audience for? Have you got like, different target audiences for different books, or is there like a?
Most of my books are for like an adult audience. I don't tend to write for YA or middle grade or anything, although I think it would be quite interesting to do that. But with the Bright Spear trilogy, which I'm best known for, it's technically an adult audience, but I tried to write it because it's like based on Celtic fairy tales. I tried to make it feel as like universal as possible. You know, like when you hear all these stories when you're a kid, and they don't feel like they're for an audience. It's just like they just are the story, and that's how it is. So, that's what I try to evoke. Certainly in my fantasy, like fairy tale based stuff, but in my other stuff, psych thrillers and horrors and whatnot, are all definitely an adult audience.
Yeah, I was quite surprised actually because I bought Careless Assassin, I think a year after it came out, and I was like, I wonder what this would be like, because like remembering from school, you were quite quiet, and then I started reading it, and I was just like, there's assassins, there's kidnappings, there's torture, and I was going like, is this the same person that was in my year at school, in my class?
It's funny though that you think I was so quiet because I'm such a chatty person, but school's just. I mean, you usually do. You get the people who do really well in high school, and you get the people who don't do so well. And I got bullied quite a lot in school, and I didn't like it a lot. And then I got to uni and like found my stride, found people, and just at that point I was like, I'll just do whatever I want. Like,
yeah.
What's the point in like being ashamed of like liking certain genres or like liking anime or liking Pokemon or like hobbies are hobbies, and just like what you like and just own it.
We were quite nervous about starting doing this, but we're now. This is actually our 30th podcast, so it's funny how when you just do one, you just get into it and you don't really have the fear anymore.
I know. Try to explain to people right enough. They're like, "You do what?" And I'm like, just listen to it. Just listen to it.
Yeah. It's good, but it's like it's the same with anything. You think, I'd like to do it, but I'm going to be rubbish. Like, what's the point? You're like, you're always going to be rubbish at something the first time you do it.
Yeah.
And if you happen to actually be great at something the first time you do it, then you might like usually if you're really good at something the first time you try it, you then hit the learning curve of how to get better than that, and you'll get worse before you get better. And a lot of people then quit because of that. And it's all just a shame because everyone has to start at the beginning at some point. It's
I
just
feel like I'm on the
impossible.
downward curve, definitely. I feel like I'm getting worse.
We're definitely a lot better than when we started. Like we did the first 10 or something just audio, and then we invested in StreamYard. So I think we prefer doing it face to face, so to speak. Anyway.
Yeah, because we were always interrupting each other. We didn't know who was going to speak when, and it was just a big blur of words, and it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, fun enough because I read books, but I'm quite a visual person, so I find it really difficult to just listen to podcasts. But I've got some people that I love that do like record their podcasts, so they go up on YouTube as well as like going up on Twitch or Spotify or whatever. And I could never just sit and listen to it. I have to have it on the screen, like just so I can get some like visual information, like on how they're saying things. Especially when you get like, were they being sarcastic? And you're like, yes, they definitely were being sarcastic.
We need to remember sometimes that people will listen to this on Spotify and YouTube. So, like
And
at the
sometimes
start,
you do
you
visual
weren't
things.
really to know that, but at the start, you waved when you were introduced.
Oh yeah, sorry, I should have said hello.
No, it's just because it took us a few goes at it to remember that we have to describe any physical actions as well.
Yeah. Currently, I'm sitting still.
Right, Paul.
All descriptions.
We went on a multiverse of tangents again.
Oh, sorry, I should have been hosting there and helping you doing that.
That's why I do that job, because I'm not afraid to be quite like abrupt with you.
It's the school teacher in you.
I know.
Right, shut up, Colin. We're moving on. Right, so part 2 was, I think you already answered this, was the worst book into movie adaptation.
Oh, when I was a child, it's funny because you had mentioned Harry Potter. I'm not really a fan of Harry Potter or anything anymore, but when I was a child, I hated the Harry Potter adaptation because it skipped so much from the book. But whatever, it is what it is. Probably the worst, like in the last few years, book to movie adaptation I've seen was Ready Player One because it was rubbish.
Ready Player One?
Yeah.
Ah.
Is that the one that... No, that's not the one Harrison Ford's in. That's a different one, isn't it?
No, it's the one they go into the Oasis.
That's Ender's Game, I'm thinking of, isn't it?
Yeah. Wait. Yeah. I haven't seen Ender's Game. The Ready Player One is the virtual reality. It feels quite generic now, but at the time when the book came out, it was like reasonably novel. Lol, because it's a novel. It's my partner's favorite book. He was so supremely disappointed when we went to see the film. He was so excited going into it. I've never seen him so frustrated with an adaptation. And then I hadn't read the book before I saw the film, and then I went and read the book, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is rubbish." The author actually put out Ready Player 2, a sequel, last year, and it was awful. It was like so bad. He was trying to write it more as like a response to like the social justice movement and stuff, and like legitimate riots that were going on, but it very much came across as someone who is extremely white, rich, middle-aged, and very right-wing, trying to write something that like doesn't like young people, even though it's being written about young people. It's like, you should just like it anyway, and everyone was like, no, we don't like this at all.
I was quite disappointed in that movie as well, and like, I've not read the book, and I thought just purely because like I think Spielberg directed it, didn't he? And, it seemed like all the perfect ingredients for like a great movie, and it just seemed like a kind of jumbled mess. Yeah,
it really was, because I saw it and I was like, Jake, I don't understand why this was one of your favorite books. And he went, this is not my favorite book. This is not an adaptation of my favorite book. So a lot of people were disappointed in that film, and rightfully so, because it was a terrible adaptation.
I still can't get my head over the guys with the VR headsets pretending they're like Master Chief at Halo running through the streets, and I'm thinking, how are they not running into things?
Do you know, it was a great film, a similar vibe. It was a Free Guy. I don't know if you've seen it yet, Paul.
Oh, I liked Free Guy though, because Free
Yeah.
Guy wasn't afraid to just be like laughing at itself.
It's
It
hard.
also didn't have any source material, so it couldn't mess up
No, I enjoy
adapting source material.
talking about adaptations, just because you like obviously similar things. Are you a Hunger Games fan of books or films or either?
I actually, yeah, I did quite like Hunger Games. So when I went to see the first film, I hadn't read the books yet, but my best friend, she had, and she was really, really excited.
Hmm.
And we went to the film, and then she was disappointed. She was like, "Oh, they missed this and they missed that." So I went and read all the books, and I was like, I actually thought the film was a pretty good adaptation.
Yeah.
Quite liked it. Quite liked the books. I mean, because they're YA, and I must have been 20 when I read them. They were already maybe like a bit below like the kind of books that I like to read. But I liked them for what they were.
Yeah.
And then I went to see the rest of the films in the cinema. The second one was really good.
Yeah.
But the decision to split the third book into two films definitely was to its detriment because it couldn't maintain the steam. Like the tension was not there. Like it didn't need to be two films. The books aren't even that long. There wasn't enough content to make two films. And by the time we got to the last film, I didn't care anymore.
The third was my least favourite because I watched the first film, read the 3 books, and then watched other films. Catching Fire was always my favourite film and book.
Yeah, I think that's a consensus, really. The second one was a lot better.
I just loved when they had to, like, they all of a sudden had to, all the previous victors had to go back in.
I mean, I was classic 20-year-old girl reading it. I loved Finnick. He was my fave. Guy with the trident from District 4. I was like, yes, for no reason.
there's a prequel book out about a young President Snow, and there's a actual film prequel coming out next year, apparently.
Yeah, I did see that, but I saw some people being like, why do we need like a book about how the villain became the villain when we could have books about like Haymitch winning the Hunger Games 25 years before the beginning? And I was like, oh my god, that would be a great book actually. But I mean, I see where Suzanne Collins, the author, is coming from, like wanting to cover it because it would be interesting to show like the beginning of the Hunger Games. But I haven't read it. Maybe I will.
I've actually got it in my bookcase. I haven't read it yet, but I'll make a point of reading it before the film comes out, or maybe not. I might wait.
Give yourself a surprise.
Yeah, we'll see.
God, I feel so bad. Like, he's so well read all these books. I think the only one I've actually listened to on Audible was World War Z, and that's probably
the one that was shot in Glasgow.
Yeah, and that's a bad book into movie adaptation because the book's completely different to the movie. The book's just all like different stories that are all really deep and have loads of. The
film is just zombies are overrun and Brad Pitt is in it.
Yeah, it's just action CGI, but yeah, it's just nothing like the book. So that was my kind of worst book into movie adaptation.
So Paul, you got one more question?
Yes, finally the big one in this section. So, out of all your books right now, which one would you like to be made into a movie the most?
See, people ask me this, and every single time I think I must surely have an answer, and I don't. I think
just say all of them.
No, that's a rubbish answer. I think film-wise, I think The Boy from the Sea would probably make the best, like 90-minute, perfect, like tight psych thriller, especially like being a Scottish one, actually being set in Scotland with like good cast. I think it's one I would like to see the most on the screen with people. It'd be really good. I think I've got other ones I prefer to see as like an animated show because I'm such a huge fan of animation, and especially when people are like, it's just for kids. And I'm like, why don't you go? No, I can't say anything inappropriate.
I agree with what you were going to say.
And I think there's a lot more freedom with animation, especially with fantasy, because there's a lot of great things that you can do with CGI, but there's a lot of terrible things you can do with CGI as well. And ultimately, I would love to see more books being adapted into the like different kind of like animated styles rather than it always being live action, especially when it's fantasy, because then you don't have to worry about like gammy CGI budgets for like a mid-budget TV show. You do animation, then
Janky things that takes you right out of it.
One of me and
exactly.
Paul's favourite recent shows is Invincible, which is a really just kind of averagely created visuals cartoon, but it's really good. It was Paul that introduced me to it, actually.
Yeah, and there's stuff like you're saying about the different animation styles as well. Star Wars Visions we were watching.
Yeah.
And it had
Oh, is that the short story Star Wars?
Yeah. And I had
oh my god, yeah, I know, I love it. One of them is from Studio Trigger, which is my favorite fangirl. I was like, oh my god, no. Studio Trigger are one of my favorite Japanese animation studios, and they did the one that's about in Star Wars Visions, the one about the twins.
Yeah.
They're like,
that
it was completely mental, like animation and stuff. They always go like completely like off the wire. Mental stuff, and they've got lots of like callbacks to like 70s and 80s animation, but like with like smoother styles because it's made now, and they never try and like make things make sense. Like, you know, people are like, I didn't like that because they didn't tie things up neatly. They literally like they go so hard on that, and it happened because it happened, but because it's like part of like the aesthetic, even in terms of the plot, it's hilarious, and the music is always great. And that's what I like about animation. You get a freedom with your media that you're working with that you don't get with live action, because when people start to have really exaggerated facial expressions and stuff, it comes across as really, really uncanny or like fake, and you don't believe what's going on.
Yeah, so I remember that episode, and is that the one when they had like the 40-foot tall lightsaber, and
and they go into space and fight,
apply.
but they don't have like any oxygen or anything. They just fight each other. Yeah, it's mental.
That's probably the top. It's not my favorite one. Probably top 3, I would say.
It's not my favorite one of Star Wars Visions, but it was just great to see Trigger, the studio, like do one. It was great.
Just this wasn't a fan question, but I'm assuming by your reaction that if someone approached you, you would be open to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly if you've written a book. I mean, obviously you get some people who are like, nope, I don't want to see it on the screen ever. But calling back to about how to live actually like profitably as a writer, one of the best things is to have your rights sold for it to appear on the screen or to be part of a screen production, because that is where a lot of the money is, selling the rights for these things. And I think it's a weird one. I know you'd probably always get writers who are like, I want to be actively part of the process to make sure they don't ruin it, and then they actually get offered lots and lots of money, and they're like, okay, here you go. But I think there's stuff like one of the recurrent things in a lot of my books is that I do set them in Scotland, whether that's like the Boy from the Sea. It matters because it's like very location specific and it's contemporary, and these places like all definitely exist right now. And there's other ones, Prince of Foxes, the Bright Spear trilogy, is set in like Regency era Scotland, but around Loch Lomond. So the places do still exist. And it matters to me if these things were going to get adapted into any kind of media that they got Scottish actors. Like I wouldn't want to be like actively involved in the process the whole time. I mean, if they wanted me to, then I'd be like happy to do it. But there are people who are better at their job than I would be at making something good for the screen. But I would want it to be an opportunity for homegrown actors and actresses to have their time to actually represent Scottish characters on the screen. So that would be like the only thing that I would be a stickler for.
Oh, you
Sorry,
think about
get Martin Constant that signed up.
Oh, Hayley Macfarlane, Neil Boyle collaboration. Neil's wanting to do a feature-length film. She's open to it.
It's a match made in heaven.
Let's make it happen.
Get 10% of all the profits go to your podcast because you set up.
We want to be extras. That's our
We want 20.
Right, I'll jump on to my wee bit. Again, kind of quick fire. Favorite, you maybe I've mentioned some of these already, but favorite book of all time. Have you got one book that stands out, or a couple that stand out?
See, this is always a hard question to ask people who love reading because, like,
There's so
I
many.
literally just read a book a couple of weeks ago called The Kingdoms by Natasha Pulley, and it's one of the best books that I've ever read. But it like made me realize like how much better it was than like other things that I had read for ages. That doesn't mean that anything else I read wasn't good. It's just that sometimes stories just really stick with you, and it's so profound. And generally, if I don't go to bed and I just read it for like 24 hours without sleep, then I consider it like up there. So if I'm going to go by that metric, The Kingdoms by Natasha Pulley is excellent. It's like a alternate history, pseudo fantasy type thing, which isn't usually like my cup of tea. But it came really highly recommended, and I didn't know anything about it other than that. And I was like, I'll just go in blind, and I loved it. Then there's Spinning Silver by Naomi Wick, which is a fairy tale retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. But that, I mean, just saying that doesn't deserve it. It's like an excellent story and really, really good. Excellent conversion of folklore. And then there's also Circe by Madeline Miller. Circe by Madeline Miller, which is a Greek mythology retelling of Circe, the goddess, who was the inspiration for Cersei in Game of Thrones. So that's interesting. Really gripping stories, written really well, good narratives. As a child, my favorite books were probably Kensuke's Kingdom by Michael McFurgo and White Fang, which was written in the 1800s, and I can't remember who wrote it. But it stuck with me because I was one of these people who's like, I love all animals, especially wolves.
Well, you got there in the end.
Sorry, I don't have like a favorite book. I just have like different books.
If they were all on a fire burning, which one would you save?
I think the first one you mentioned would be the one you save.
Well, no, because that's only because it's the most recent one that I read that I really, really loved. I don't think necessarily would be the one that I saved. If I could only save one book, it would probably be Exodus by Julie Protagona, Scottish author. I read the book when I was 13. It was set around Scotland in like cities that sit above the sky because everything's flooded from global warming. Great book. I actually like it was part of the book awards when I was like 13, and classic again, nerd me. I was like joined the library book award, children's book award thing at school. It's like I want to read all the books and go to Edinburgh Book Festival.
Paid off.
I didn't go to her interview, like her Q&A session, because I went to someone for like another book. Because I hadn't read hers yet. It was one of the only ones I hadn't read in the collection. And then I bought her book when I was there, got back home and read it, and I was like, oh my god, I wish I'd spoken to her now. But funny story, we both follow each other on Twitter now and talk to each other, and that's really nice. And she likes that my copy of the book is so dog-eared, and also at one point my little brother put it in the sink and it got really wet and I had to like dry out on a radiator. And the book's about global warming, so it looks like the book has been drowned. And she was like, I love that. So I think for like sentimental value as well as like the story and other things, that would be the book that I save.
Nice. Are we Twitter friends with Paul? Are we Twitter friends with Hayley?
I'm friends with very few people that I know in real life on Twitter.
Well, I followed her. We followed her. I don't know if she followed us back though, you know.
Well, maybe I didn't know who it was.
To be fair, that happened once before because we were talking to Neil Boyle about coming on, and we just assumed he knew it was us. And then when it came to arranging it, he didn't know it was us, and it was a bit awkward for the time.
Yeah, you thought we were uni students from Glasgow, just randomly.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, Seismic Cinema. Hang on. Did you follow my personal one? Hang on.
I followed your company one, McFarlane Lantern.
Ah, right. Okay. See, I'm more discerning about who I follow on that because it's a company page. Hang on. Seismic Cinema. This is me finding out. There you are. All right. Okay, I'll follow you back.
Yes.
Paul was really sad.
Yeah. I saved you.
I didn't know who it was.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and that is understandable. I get that. My very last question, and again, you've got Paul to thank for all these on-the-spot questions this week.
I followed you on my personal account as well. There you go.
There you go. 2. That's us up to 580, maybe. 580. Right, Hayley, last question for me, although Paul made it up. Who would you choose to play you in a movie about your life?
Probably. Have you guys ever seen Mr. Robot, the TV show?
Yeah.
You know the detective. She's played by Grace Gummer, Meryl Streep's daughter.
It's been a while since I watched it. I would have to.
She kind of looks like me, and I get people messaging me all the time. She was also an American Horror Story at some point. People are always like, "Oh my god, she looks like you. She looks like she could be your sister." So just for that, it would be.
What
her.
was her name again?
She's called Grace Gummer. Gummer, Gummer.
She does look like you.
I can see it a wee bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd pick her.
Nice. But who did you choose again?
Although she's older than me, but I mean that's usually the case. People who play you are always like 10 to 15 years older than how old you actually are.
I still can't get over the fact we're in our 30s now.
We are 30. We're not in our 30s.
I'm 31 next week, so
well, I'm 31 in the middle of July, so it's not that far.
I'm October. I'm a baby.
Paul, you've got the penultimate section.
The penultimate section, right? So we also know that you also like to do a wee bit of kind of visit the Comic Cons, do a wee bit of cosplay in your time.
Yes, I do.
So, if money was no object, what would be your ultimate costume?
Oh, that's a good question. See, I think I would like to do Samus from Metroid.
Oh yeah, nice.
But I would like have the helmet, so the helmet would be removable, so I could like carry it about.
That'd be pretty cool.
Because I think it's funny at the end of Metroid how like everyone always just assumed it was a guy, and then you get to the end of it, you take your helmet off, and you're like, "What? It's like this blonde woman." And I was like, "Yes, that's
people
great."
are like, "I'm not playing this anymore."
But one of my favorite things about cosplay is making the props. And so I've made like foam armor, I've made weapons and stuff before. I really, really like it. I probably preferred that more than actually like wearing the costume to the convention, like the making of the costume.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
I mean, I do really like the wearing it and everything like that. It's really fun. But I really love like fabricating all the stuff. So I think I would want to do something that was like quite like big and labor intensive. Yeah. Something with like giant wings. Actually, I have done giant wings before. They're really hard to do, and I wouldn't recommend wearing them. Maybe I'd make them for someone else. But I think Samus would be a really cool one to do.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, or like maybe do a dragon somehow. I don't know.
So you could do the costume designing for your movies as well.
There's another business.
Oh no, there's people much better than I would be at that.
Another business avenue, just manufacture them and sell them to other people as well.
I mean, it's so labor intensive, to be honest, and the profit margins on it are not very big, so certainly definitely not worth doing. I like doing it for myself. I like using my glue gun and sourcing the stuff and making it all.
What would you do?
Well, first of all, I'm enjoying all the business terminology in this podcast. Right up my street. What would I go? I have almost bought the helmet before. I'd quite like to do like the full Mandalorian, like the proper.
Oh, nice yeah. That would be a cool one.
I was at this really mini Comic Con in Greenock, and you could get the helmet for like, I think it was like £50, and I was like, I can't really justify just buying the Mandalorian.
See, a heat gun, get the foam and a glue gun, and get the good paint, so you could make it for less than 50 quid, and it would fit you, and it would be so much lighter. But you just also have to put in all the time and effort into learning how to do it.
The only costume that I make, it would definitely look like something off of Wish, wouldn't it?
The Wish version.
Or Colin, you could talk to our new Twitter follower Hayley and see if she would do it for you.
That's Halloween sorted this year.
One of the best things I ever worked on wasn't for me. It was for Jake, my boyfriend. He went as Bojack Horseman one year, and he made a 2-scale horse head out of foam. I don't have a photo to hand. It was so cool. It took us so long because we made it from a papercraft file. So basically, we had to print off sheets and sheets and sheets of like the paper bits that you put together, like stick them all together, and then either paper mache on top of them, or like you use that to like cut all the foam bits out. So we made it out of foam, and it took so long. It's like a super complicated 3D jigsaw puzzle, and you cut out all the paper bits, and then you have to cut it all out of foam again, and then you have to stick all these bits together, and then you have to paint it. But it was so worth it because we went to Comic-Con. And he was literally dressed as Bojack Horseman with this giant horse head on. People like could not believe who it was, but he couldn't see. He had like the eyes in the front, like cut, and I had to like hold his hand, like pull him around the convention. Which was really, really funny. There was another Comic-Con he went as Red Hood, the Joker from Killing Joke, and when it's the red like jar on his head. He couldn't see out of that either. He had like put little pinholes in it to try and see. But again, I had to like take him around like by his hand and be like, do you feel like making a costume next time that you can see?
Yeah, something
just once. But yeah, I think it's really fun to like do costumes like that. Unfortunately, a lot of female costumes are like, how skimpy can we go? Add a cape to it and thigh-high boots, you're good to go. And I'm like, oh, excellent.
That's just like Halloween as well.
Exactly.
I really hope that horse head wasn't left lying about and you woke up to that like in the there's a movie with that in there.
Oh my god, yeah.
Godfather.
I can't remember what it is, but waking up to a horse's head is definitely something. Yeah.
We moved house last year. And we were going to bring it with us because we were like joking about like mounting it on the wall, like as if it was like a deer head. We were like, nah, that is like way too creepy. Let's just not do that. So we left it outside the flat, like like where people pick up furniture and stuff like that. If it's pick up, I was like, let's just leave it there and see if someone picks it up. And they did. Like 2 hours later, so someone saw the horse head and went, yes, what a find! I'm going to take this.
See if you're out there, horseman. Heads up.
Yeah. We want to find it again.
Hey, Paul, there's 2 rankings left. Are we going to do the both? Or are we going to do, or let Hayley choose which one of the 2? What are you thinking?
We'll see what's happening. See how long we're going. So, because we're talking about cosplay and costumes and such, it is now on to your second top 5 or on to second top 5, which is our top 5 Marvel movies.
Okay, so the Marvel ones are actually in order, but 2 of them are TV shows, because I thought they were better than films. So
if WandaVision's in there, then it's good.
It is.
Yes.
The 5th is Captain America: Civil War because it's a solid film. Then it's Ant-Man because Paul Rudd is hilarious. I really liked like the feeling of it. It felt more like a comic book film.
Yeah, it feels underrated, that one.
Paul, these are like our choices from our ranking, basically.
And then it's WandaVision.
Yeah.
I really liked WandaVision, but I felt like it was rushed in its final episode, which was a bit of a shame.
Yeah. I loved it. The first 5 episodes were like amazing, and the last 3 were like.
It's when they got into the stuff that's setting up other bits in the Marvel universe, I thought it got weaker. When it got to just be its own thing, I was like, yeah, this is one of the best things that Marvel's ever done. And then it's Thor Ragnarok because Taika Waititi is a genius and it's so funny. And leading into that, my favorite is Loki, but again, not the final episode. Loki up until the final episode is perfection, and I love it. And I love Tom Hiddleston, and I think his iteration of Loki, especially after Thor Ragnarok, where Taika Waititi injected like more humor into the characters, which exists in the comic books. I thought the Loki TV series benefited from that, and having Richard E. Grant in it as well as older Loki was such an inspired choice. So just overall, I thought it felt most like akin to a comic book adaptation than quite a lot of the other things were, which is why it's my favorite.
Oh, you're
I was
watching.
going to put like Spider-Man in somewhere, but I was like, nah.
Oh, you're not watching Loki right now, or did you not start watching it?
I watched the first episode and then I got sidetracked. But I think it might have been Squid Game or something. I got sidetracked with and
Yeah.
ended up watching that.
That's not bad.
I was also going to put in Daredevil because I love season 1 and season 3 of Daredevil, but I didn't like season 2. So I was like, if I didn't like like a third of a show, it shouldn't necessarily be up there. But Matt Murdock Daredevil is probably like my favorite superhero. That wasn't one of your rankings, but that's the answer.
I kind of had the fear there when you said Daredevil. I thought you were going to talk about the Ben Affleck movie. And I was
Let's not talk about the Ben Affleck film.
What did you think? What did you think of Hawkeye? I really liked it. Paul's not watched it.
I loved Hawkeye, actually. I thought, again, was another one that felt really close to the source material it was based on. It felt like a comic book. They should have revealed Kingpin. Spoiler alert, guys. Should have revealed Kingpin.
Oh, actually, just walked away at that point, which is good.
Whatever. Should have revealed Kingpin earlier because it was better for Echo's character, his niece. It was better for her storyline for you to know him earlier. But keeping it back as a reveal to be like a big reveal when people had already kind of sussed it out, felt like it cheapened the story. I did also recently watch Moon Knight, and I liked it when they let Oscar Isaac go completely unhinged.
Yeah.
And I liked it less when he was like only playing the straight-laced assassin, one of his personalities.
Mark,
yeah. I thought it was funnier when he was Stephen. Like,
yeah.
I really liked it when he was Stephen, but when he was only Mark, I thought it suffered a little bit. When he was playing both of them, it was also great, but it was just that middle section felt really slow.
We thought, well, yeah, I was a wee bit mixed on it. I think I liked it. I think we basically said we liked it, but I wasn't like counting down the minutes till the next episode. I was kind of just taking my time and watching it when I could.
Yeah, I think I just liked Oscar Isaac in it rather than I liked the story or anything.
Well, I've got a wee idea. Will we do the plugs and that now and then finish off on some nice final messages?
Okay.
Sure.
So, Hayley, you want to plug? I know you've been talking about like different things. Is there anything like social media or anything particular you'd like to?
So I do have a bit coming out in September. Taking a break from all the fantasy to write a rom-com. Heaven forbid. But I wanted to write something contemporary and something like based in Glasgow, around stuff that I knew. So it's literally about two scientists at Glasgow Uni. I don't want to say anything more than that because, like, as with most rom-coms, like the premise is quite simple. So it's called the Unbalanced Equation. When I came up with that name, I was like, yes, a science pun. But if you're interested in finding out more about that, you can follow me on Twitter at HL Macfarlane or Macfarlane Lantern Publishing, but I've got a personal Twitter and a business one. Or you can find me on BookBub or Amazon. I mean, if you look up HL Macfarlane on Amazon or Prince of Foxes, you'll probably find me and then you can see it. But Twitter is the only social media I use to like chat away about rubbish. I won't swear. And share memes and stuff around promo. So if you want to like keep up to date with things, Twitter is probably the best place to go. So that's probably my social media plug as well. Go there. And yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram as well, but I'm definitely on Twitter. I'm like more active. Just more interesting for me personally.
Paul's quite into the Twitter as well these days.
I know. I end up just talking a lot of nonsense to random people most of the time.
But I mean, that's
though.
the point of Twitter.
We're now approaching. We've got 579 followers since January, or probably less than January, which is not too bad. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook at Seismic Cinema. And Paul's going to make me say all the different. Paul, do you think we should just change it? See, the cool podcasters, they just say, "Oh, you'll find our podcast at the places where you listen
below,
to."
or it's pointed at the screen.
We don't have the buttons
Yeah.
yet. Working on the button. So yeah, you can listen to your podcast at the places where you listen to your podcast, because we basically are on all of them, and it is really cool. So thank you, Anchor and people, for letting us be on all these things for free and not costing any money.
Except StreamYard, making us.
So yeah, this is coming out on, what day is it, Paul? It's been a long week already. This is coming out on Thursday night, Thursday the 26th of May, and then on Friday or Saturday, we're going to launch our review of the first 2 episodes of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, which we're very excited about.
I'm excited about that too.
So
who doesn't love Ewan McGregor?
Yes, we all.
Oh, definitely.
We very much love Ewan McGregor. So yeah, Paul, I just thought maybe doing that now means we can finish on some nice messages about being an author and all those inspirational things.
Yeah. So basically, well, I think you spoke about it earlier on about what the kind of future holds with your Unbalanced Equation
book
project.
Words. It's fine.
What else is in the future for you?
Well, beyond that, I've got another series, a trilogy. Like Invisible Monsters is the first book, and I'm writing books 2 and 3 right now to release at the end of this year, the beginning of next year, to get it done. And then I've got the Dark Spear duology, which is the sequel to the Bright Spear trilogy, which is like my best-selling trilogy of books. So I'm getting to that straight after that. Beyond that, I've got the next book in the fairy tale folklore anthology with the other authors to publish, and I've got about 20 other book outlines and stuff that I've got like on the back burner to decide what to do next. So let's see what my brain allows me to focus on for long enough to publish it, and we shall see. But I need to focus on the Unbalanced Equation first. I'm hoping to be able to do an actual like physical book launch this year. Because of COVID, I haven't been able to do any for ages. So I'm hoping to be able to like do more of a thing when the book comes out in September than I have been able to do in the past. But we shall see. I've got my sister's wedding to do first, which is in Ibiza, and then my best friend's wedding follows like immediately after that. So I've got like personal life things to do before I jump back into the writing wheelhouse. But that's the timeline, at least for the next like year and a bit or so.
Very nice. And then, this is your section, Colin. I'm reading these for you.
To be honest, no, that's your section. The picture I took, I can't actually see the margins, so
All right, okay.
That's fine.
Anyway, I digress. So, in your ultimate wisdom, young Miss Hayley, do you have any...
Dr. Hayley, I think you'll find.
Yes, Paul.
Dr. Hayley. Any words to any aspiring writers?
Yeah, I mean, there's the usual stuff, which is just keep doing it. The worst thing in the world to do as a writer, to write something and be like, this is rubbish, and then never do it ever again. Just keep doing it. And people will always tell you this, especially if you're looking to publish a book and you think that you're the exception. But the first book you write is probably not going to be in publishable material. Certainly not the first, the first draft or whatever that you've done it. So what you should do is put it to the side and write the next thing. You can go back to it, you can gut it, you can like completely change it, or you can be like, actually, no, I'm quite happy with the way that things are going. But the best thing you can do after writing your first book is to write your second and keep going, then go back to it. And it's tough news to hear, because I think people always want to think that the first thing they've written is the greatest thing that has ever existed. It's not. It's just not. Even the people that you hear about who their debut novels are like bestsellers, that's not the first book they've ever written. They've written a few. So don't hold yourself to the same standards as like the writers that you're aspiring to follow, the people that like inspires you to be a writer. Just do the work. That's not usually the answer people want to hear, but if you're passionate about it, you do need to do the work. And if you stick with it, if you stick with anything else, you will get better at it. And if you set yourself clear goals that you want to follow and you look into how you can achieve those goals, then there's no reason why you shouldn't. But you do need to have a good backbone when you do this stuff, because it's not as easy as just being like you're creative and you can get the words down the page. So I think that's the most level-headed advice I can do. But you should always want to do what you're doing. The moment it's not fun anymore, consider having a break. Because if you found it fun in the past, then maybe you just need to like re-find why it was fun for you in the past. And if the only way for it to be fun is for you to like not try and take it as seriously anymore, then maybe you have to consider that that's the way that you should do it. But it depends on who you are. So that's some nice circular advice about all the ways that you could be an aspiring writer.
I'm feeling very inspired.
I know. Have you ever thought about a wee side hustle and inspirational speeches?
Oh my god. I'd never shut up. So no. I'd be even worse at tangents than you are, Paul.
The Multiverse of Tangents, that was our Doctor Strange title. But I don't know if I ever actually spoke to you about this. I think I did. I had an idea for a book once, and twice I've wrote the first 2 chapters, and I just couldn't get past it. But I had an outline of where I wanted it to go. So that's like the opposite problem. I was struggling to get the words down on the page.
Well, you get different people. You get people who they have an idea, and it's called pantsing, where you don't have an outline, you just write. It's almost like you write based on vibes. Yeah. Like you just keep writing. I outline everything. I love outlining. I feel like it's like my most inspired part of the process is when like my brain's going through it, and I'll do this, and like I'll work it out through the chapters and be like, I've got a plot problem like from earlier on, let's try and fix it. That doesn't mean I don't change things when I'm then writing a proper draft from my outline, because sometimes I'll be like, well, this doesn't work anymore because of like how things have organically evolved. But I have to outline. But again, there's like no 2 ways up the mountain, or the saying is, you just write the way that you're comfortable with writing, and don't feel like because you're not writing the same way that someone else is that you're doing it wrong. But if you've been outlining stuff and you write 2 chapters and then you don't know where to go from that anymore, maybe consider trying to write something shorter without an outline, so that you don't feel like you've already like come to the conclusion of what the story is.
Like a summary of the idea, maybe like a short story of the overall idea.
Yeah, exactly. So try something more manageable, because there's nothing more satisfying than like finishing any kind of creative project and looking at it knowing that like you did it from start to finish. So pick something smaller, Colin, and maybe try not to outline it so stringently. Try and be like not necessarily knowing where it's going at the end, and just like get it written, and then you can look at it at the end and be like, oh, well, that ending didn't make any sense, but you still ended it. And then you can learn a lot about the process and about what that means for you as a writer.
Yeah, that's good advice, because you're better to produce something smaller than maybe you'd want than nothing at all, I suppose.
Exactly. And it's the thing, like, if you're working on, like, if you've got 12 unfinished novels, that means you've got 0 finished novels. You could finish one of them, but if you never finish a novel because you always end up going on to the next project because you get bored of the one before, you never have a finished product. So, like, what's the point? If you want to finish writing a novel, what was the point?
The last time I touched it was during the first lockdown, so that was obviously a time where there was a lot of additional lifetime going around.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's the thing. I think people forget that your life, like your circumstances, will affect how much you can like manage to do things. It'll affect your creative output. It will affect what you want to write or what you want to do at all. And people feel bad if they wrote every single day and then something like the pandemic happens and they find it really difficult to write. shouldn't feel bad. It's a pandemic. Like, horrible things are happening and everyone's really stressed. Everyone's doom scrolling on Twitter and all the news is absolutely terrible. If you're not writing every day, well, I mean, it's a wonder that you're getting out of bed and still functioning every day. Like, I think people need to give themselves a bit more slack.
We need to be kind to ourselves. But also, Hayley, you've got the great honour, if it is an honour, of being our 30th podcast and our last of season 1.
And we're age 30. Hooray.
Anchor, which is the app we normally publish it through, that it then goes on to Spotify, etc. It asks you for a season number. And we've been just putting in season 1 and episode whatever. And we're like, we can't just do season 1 for like however long we do this. So we said
or can you?
The podcast before Obi-Wan would be the last one, because we started the podcast doing the Book of Boba Fett. So that was the way it worked out.
Yeah.
You're going to call that episode Obi-2?
Oh. I like it.
Need to consider the algorithm.
Oh, God.
Right.
Fine. Oh, sorry, you go, Colin.
We've got a tradition. I actually stole this off another podcast, but we've got a tradition that at the end of the podcast, the guest shares our slogan. I don't know if Paul told you it.
I did not.
Maybe didn't. So, Paul, over to
you. So our slogan is the power of books. No, it's not. It's the power of escapism.
The power of escapism, okay.
The power of
not
books.
The power of books.
No. We just thought, I was just trying to come up with something that was like, I don't really know where it came from, but yeah.
It's the title of his book.
We do believe in the power. Also noticed you did mention your 90s movies later, and we don't want you to feel unfulfilled here. Were you
I'll tell you what they are. Yeah, why not?
We're all wanting to know what they are, yeah.
So my 90s films are, again, I don't think they're in an order. I've got Batman Returns, the one with Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman in it. And I've got Perfect Blue, which is an anime psych thriller. It's excellent. You've Got Mail, which is probably one of the most quintessential perfect rom-coms that has ever existed, featuring Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. I've got The Mummy, because it's excellent.
Oh, yeah.
And Clueless, because it's probably one of the best Jane Austen adaptations that has ever happened, and it's still really, really funny and relevant now. And Paul Rudd is in it, and he looks the same age as he does now. So what's not to love?
It's spooky, isn't it?
Haven't you McGregor up to something, I think?
Well, the thing is, Moulin Rouge is one of my favourite films, but that came out in like 2001 or something like that. So it didn't make it into like the 90s. I did want to get you McGregor in there somewhere, but he wasn't in any of my favourite 90s films, so he just had to like not be in the
list.
Nah, not doing that.
Did you always think this?
I've seen that too many times for the fact that I don't like it.
It's weird, when you're younger, you always think that when you get older, people won't look as good. But do you not think these actors like Ewan McGregor and that, like, do you think they're getting better with age? It's like,
you look at it, you're like, you were a baby back then. I thought you were so old, and now you look great.
Yeah. It's strange, isn't it? Must be the haircuts and the clothes. That must be a big part of it.
Well, I mean, it's also the fact that they're all millionaires and they have personal trainers and they're all like being looked after by everyone. So of course they're going to look better.
Pampered. Whereas we're all roughing it in the big bad world.
Right. So that is drawn to a close then?
I think so, yes. So Hayley, thank you very much again for coming on as our guest and hanging out with us, two idiots, and not knowing what we're doing half the time.
Giving up a large chunk of your Thursday. What day is it? Tuesday night?
Tuesday, whatever.
It's been one of those
no. It was really good. I've never been on a podcast before. I've done Instagram lives for book stuff before, but never anything like this. So I was a little bit nervous going in, but it was great. You guys were great. It was nice to catch up. So I'll be like, this has been the power of escapism.
Nice. And I'm definitely going to either get an audio book or order a book tonight before bed. That's my plan. Well,
that's very nice. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And don't return
it. Don't return it. Yeah. It's not a library.
Nah, I wouldn't be doing that. So, just because I think when we did this before with a guest, they thought as soon as it ended, you know what I'm trying to say? If we hit end, we'll still be here. It won't totally disappear, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you don't need to click off for it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
But anyway,
see you on the other side.
yes, see you all, guys, and thanks for watching, everybody. We've been
I'm
Seismic Cinema,
waving for anyone who's listening. Bye.
and this has been Dr. Hayley.
Yep.
Thank you.